And that's not therapy, that's collusion, right? It took me a long time to unpack that, to see how much platonic chemistry can skew your objectivity, to admit that I'd stop holding space for Jade's version of the relationship and started privately siding with Emily, even if that wasn't my intention. Here's what I know now. Therapists are wired for connection like anyone else, which means we're wired for bias, and bias without awareness can turn into sabotage, quiet, invisible sabotage that feels like empathy in the room, but actually steals something from the work. The job isn't to pretend you don't have favorites. The job is to notice when your loyalty has shifted from being to both to being for one, and to pull yourself back before you've tipped the scale so far that there's no turning back. Because once you take a side, you're no longer holding the whole story, right? You're holding one person's truth.
I'm John Kim, a licensed therapist who used to be a miserable fuck before going on a hero's journey and turning expired relationships into revelations. I use my story to help others come with you instead of at you, unrehearsed on purpose, because self-help doesn't have to be polished or complicated, just honest.
On today's episode, I took a client's side because I liked them more than their partner. Bias, chemistry, and loyalty in the room. Sometimes the hardest part of couples therapy isn't saving the relationship, it's keeping your own loyalties in check. And this is a chapter from my new book, Shit Your Therapist Would Never Tell You. And I'm doing something different with this book. This is book number 9, by the way. I'm actually letting you read it as I write it. So I want to distribute it in real time, which I've always wanted to do, but never had the courage to. You know, as a writer, I think a lot of times we're so precious with our words that we don't let people see it. And even when it comes out, we're like, oh man, I wish I could take it back. And I'm forcing myself to lean into that and to rip the curtain off, not just pull the curtain back, but rip the curtain off so you can see the experience I'm going through and also the pages as I write them. You could get them all on my Substack as a paid subscriber. And it's really inexpensive, the subscription. But you will get all the behind the scenes. I'm on Substack at The Angry Therapist, and you will get the pages as I'm writing them. And this is a really interesting chapter. It's about how therapists, especially in couples therapy, take the side of one person more than the other. So therapists aren't supposed to have favorites, right? The textbooks call it unconditional positive regard, the unspoken agreement that is no matter what, you hold both people with equal care. No leaning, no nudging, no choosing sides. But here's the thing they don't tell you in grad school. That is that you're human. And that's always been my mission. My calling is to humanize the therapist, which I've been doing since 2010 when I went rogue and started meeting people at coffee shops and doing walk and talks and all sorts of outside the box, all sorts of you should not do this kind of things. Anyway, for me, it was Emily, not quote unquote favorite because I agreed with her arguments. Favorite in the, if we weren't in this professional container, we'd probably be buds kind of way, right? Emily was funny without performing, deeply self-aware, and she owned her mistakes before anyone else could point them out. She was also wildly likable in the way that some people just are, you know? And unlike previous clients, like I mentioned above, the chemistry wasn't sexual or fantasy-based. It was purely platonic, which in a way made it even more potent since guards were down and there were no intentions, right? No one was hiding behind secret desires. She had that bro down energy. Unlike her partner, Jade, on the other hand, was different. She came in guarded, sharp-edged. I mean, every story Emily told was countered, corrected, or dismissed before I could even ask a follow-up. I'm sure Jade had her reasons. Her history was laced with betrayal and loss. But in the room, it felt like she was playing chess while Emily and I were playing catch, right? And I told myself I was being balanced. But the truth was I wasn't. I wanted Emily to win. I wanted Jade to soften. I wanted her to see what I saw in Emily, her effort, her willingness, her accountability. And in subtle ways, I started tilting the table. One afternoon, Jade accused Emily of checking out emotionally because she didn't reply to a text for 3 hours. This actually sounds like me, something I would do. Anxiously attached. It showed she read it, Jade defended. And without thinking, I jumped in. But didn't you say earlier that she'd been more present lately and that you're working on not taking things so personally, especially how fast someone texts you back? Jade shot me a look back that said, "Whose therapist are you?" I could also tell she was jealous of the organic banter in the room Emily and I had. She laughed. I laughed at her jokes. She laughed at mine. We had things in common. We both grew up LA. Jade was from the East Coast. Me and Emily were on Team Tupac, right? And Jade was Biggie. I could see how Jade could feel left out. And that's the thing about bias in therapy. You think you're hiding it. You think you're just quote unquote balancing the conversation, but it leaks. It always leaks. And when it does, trust erodes, not just with the person you're leaning away from, but with the one you're leaning toward, because deep inside, they know you're not fully neutral. You're not just listening, you're lobbying. This is when suddenly they stop coming, and the one you like better says, things are better, which is a complete lie, and you know it's not. But they had a conversation, not a fight, because it's something Emily couldn't argue with. The bias connection was felt by everyone. And now you, as a therapist, is the one who feels left out. This is when reality hits and you realize you were hired. You work for them as one unit, not as individuals. The cold shower moment, the shower of shame and embarrassment. Another mistake you can't take back, right? Another lesson learned. And another reason why you wonder if you could continue with this profession. Yes, therapists are really hard on themselves. We carry a lot, and we also have our own stories, right? Our own wounds, our own weaknesses. As a therapist, you can't dwell, because if you do, this work will eat you alive. Yes, you can take the lessons in, you can adjust, look at what's yours to own, and do the post-game analysis. And you adjust so you can be a better therapist tomorrow than you were today. But you can't replay every word, every silence, every micro expression like you're studying the game tape. Therapy is not math. It's not exact. It's subjective. What lands with one client might completely miss with another. What saves someone in one session might trigger or activate someone in the next. That's the maddening and the beautiful part of therapy. Therapy is many nervous systems in a room colliding, mirroring, activating, soothing, and sometimes even wounding. You don't always know in the moment which is happening. You just try to stay honest, stay human, and stay in the work, as they say. But at some point, you do have to let go. You have to accept that you're not in control of the outcome, no matter how much you care. We are not doctors. We don't stitch wounds or prescribe pills that promise relief in 30 minutes. Therapy isn't concrete like that. It's abstract, messy, and layered. People come in wanting answers, but most of the time, there aren't answers, at least not the kind you can write on a pad. We don't fix people. We don't cure them. What we do is hold space. We sit in the dark with them until their own eyes adjust. Let me highlight that. Let me bold that. I like that sentence, by the way. A little pat on the back for John Kim. We help them hear the truth they've been avoiding. We help unearth what's buried underneath. We give them new lenses, but we don't offer the map. We sit in the passenger seat while they figure out which road they're ready to take. And can I say, this whole thing I just told you, this whole paragraph, it's not just for therapists and clients. It's actually for anyone in their relationship. You know, this whole idea of holding space, to sit in the dark with them until their own eyes adjust. That is not only therapeutic, but that is love, isn't it? And it's also very hard to do, especially if you love, because if you love someone, you want to naturally help them. But what we define as help may not be help for them, because we could think we're helping someone, but what we're doing is stripping their truth. We are trying to change them. We are giving them help based on our definition of what we think they need, not based on their definition, or not based on where they're at, right? When you want to help someone, they actually may agree that that's what help looks like, but they may not, that may not be what they need at the moment. So clients will leave, stay, grow, relapse, thrive, or fall apart, sometimes despite your best work and sometimes because of it. And your job isn't to guarantee success. Your job is to show up Hold that space and trust that even the imperfect moments can plant something useful, not only for them, but also for you. I really want to point that out, that when you're a therapist, there is an equal exchange. Yes, of course, we signed up to help other people. They're paying us to, but we get something out of every session. And if we're not, I got to say, that's a good sign that the therapist isn't doing her own work if you're not getting something out of every session. Anyway, a few months later, Emily came in alone and they broke up. She didn't look shattered. She looked freer. And for a split second, I felt relief, like she'd escaped. But the relief was followed by something heavier, shame. Because if I'm honest, I'd been rooting for that ending since the first month. And that's not therapy, that's collusion, right? It took me a long time to unpack that, to see how much platonic chemistry can skew your objectivity, to admit that I'd stopped holding space for Jade's version of the relationship and started privately siding with Emily, even if that wasn't my intention. Here's what I know now. Therapists are wired for connection like anyone else, which means we're wired for bias, and bias without awareness can turn into sabotage, quiet, invisible sabotage that feels like empathy in the room, but actually steals something from the work. The job isn't to pretend you don't have favorites. The job is to notice when your loyalty has shifted from being to both to being for one, and to pull yourself back before you've tipped the scale so far that there's no turning back. Because once you take a side, you're no longer holding the whole story, right? You're holding one person's truth. And therapy at its best is the rare place where both get to live in the room, even when you secretly like one of them more. Well, this is one thing I'm talking about because most therapists do not. All the things that therapists are too scared to talk about, I am talking about, of course, through my own experience and lens, right? I have definitely been biased in rooms. Doesn't mean that other therapists have. Well, I know for sure other therapists have because therapists are human, but I'm not saying that every therapist has. Does that make sense? Anyway, there's two things in my book that I write after every story. One is shit to sit with, and the other one is tools that you can actually use. So with this story, shit to sit with, your bias doesn't mean you're a bad therapist, right? But denying it will. Ooh, denying it will. Maybe that's one of the reasons why I'm coming out with this shit, is so I could get it off my chest. And so I don't believe that I'm a bad therapist, because if I don't say anything and hold it inside, that's a form of denial. And by being in denial, I think, well, at least to me, that's being a bad therapist. Every therapist has clients they click with more. Pretending otherwise doesn't make it disappear. It just drives it underground, where it shapes your tone, your phrasing, and also your facial expressions. I've got these deep furrows. I call them marking marks. My facial expression is always resting bitch face, which is on brand for me because I'm known as the angry therapist, but I really don't like it all. Anyway, connection can cloud objectivity. Quote unquote, I just like them is not a reason to subtly advocate for one partner. That likability can make you interrupt their story as more true or their pain as more justified, even when it's not. You can collude without realizing it. It's not always blatant alliance building, right? Sometimes bias is one well-timed validating nod, one extra minute on their point, or one, but to be fair kind of statement that feels like advocacy instead of neutrality. But again, listen, we're not perfect. And if we review therapy sessions like it's game tape, you're going to take a black light to that, and you are going to because we're hard on ourselves, right? And you're going to start to believe that you're not good. You're going to doubt your profession. I mean, you're going to collapse on yourself. So be kind and compassionate to yourself, knowing that therapy is abstract. Again, you're not a doctor. Your favorite client can still be wrong. Warmth and charm doesn't make someone's perspective more accurate, right? Just because you connect with someone and that person is someone that you would want to be friends with in real life doesn't mean that that person's right. They got shit too. They make it easier to believe because they may be charismatic or because you guys have that banter, which is exactly why you have double checked yourself. Bias doesn't just affect the other person. Even a client you like will eventually sense your tilt, and it can rob them of their growth. they might have had if you been truly neutral. There are opportunities that you should have called them out on their shit, but you didn't because you like them. Also, it breaks trust. Special with them. If you give them favors, they will notice that and it will make them trust you less, even though you're befriending them or even though you are kind of helping them more. It could backfire. All right, tools you can actually use. Check your click radar. After every couple of sessions, ask yourself, whose perspective do I believe more right now and why? If the answer is the same person more than twice in a row or maybe 3 times, it's time to investigate your bias. That being said, there are people who obviously in like especially couple session where one person is just has done no work, is defensive, and yeah, that person is always wrong. And that is truth. You're not even taking anyone's sides. It's just obvious, right? There are those clients as well. Use time as a balancing tool. Literally track how much airtime you give each partner. Oh, this is important because some people like to talk. And if some people like to talk and you like the person who likes to talk, it's very easy to not give airtime to the other person. So if one person is consistently getting more, you got to redistribute that, right? You got to shut the other person up and give the other person, ask that person questions, give them more airtime. This keeps the playing field even without relying solely on your subjective, quote unquote, sense of balance. Ask more than you affirm. Hey, by the way, as you're listening to this, you don't have to be a therapist to get something out of this because these are all things you can do with your partner in your relationship. And if you're not in a relationship with any relationship, friendships, family, any human exchange, ask more than you affirm. When you notice yourself nodding along with your partner, pause and redirect your curiosity to the other. Replace that makes sense with what's it like for you to hear that, right? Also, name it in supervision. Hopefully, you are in supervision. Most of us who have full practices are like me. Of course, I've had supervision for many years just because I do less one-on-one therapy and more like retreats and writing books and social media. I currently don't have supervision. But you know what? It's a great idea to get a group together of therapists who don't have supervision, and then you all kind of check yourself. Bring the client dynamic into your own therapy or supervision, saying out loud, I like Emily more than Jade. It gives you a chance to explore why and separate personal preference from clinical judgment. Use the flip role question. In your mind, switch the client's positions. Imagine the less favored partner saying what the favored one just said. Would you respond the same way? Isn't that powerful? Like, just flip it where what came out of the person that you really like, her mouth, imagine the other person saying that. Would the bias still play out? And finally, get honest with yourself about outcome bias. If you're secretly rooting for a breakup, pause, ask yourself, am I holding the relationship's possibility? Or am I holding my personal preferences? Right? Your job is the first one because the relationship is the unit, not the individuals. It's the relationship that has hired you, not the individual people. And I got to say, that said, your goal, and this is my belief, when you're doing couples work, your goal isn't to fix the relationship. I get that's what's on paper. Your goal is to help each person stand on their truth, evolve and grow, each person to self-actualize. And if after that it saves the relationship, great. But there's also a chance because of that, people drift and the relationship bottoms out. I got to say, most people who come to couples counseling, as they grow and work on themselves, they don't stay together. And it's sad. But then what's the alternative? Because you can't have people growing and naturally drifting apart and then forcing them to stay in something that isn't their truth, right? And so, yes, of course, you're supposed to help the relationship ultimately, give them tools, and you're doing everything you can to work through conflict and really kind of rebuild their relationship container. But if them working on themselves naturally pulls them apart, I mean, there's truth in that. And I don't think there's any tool that can fix that because people are just on their own growing, evolving journey. And, people drift. The goal would be to not drift, but to grow together, right? The goal would be to be aware of the drift and to work on growing together. And that will save the relationship. But sometimes that's not impossible because drift is too far or because nothing's aligned or because they want different things, right? Thank you for listening. The next one I'm going to do, or another one I'm going to do, is I secretly rooted for your relationship to fail. I know it sounds horrible, but it's because I knew you deserved more. There's a difference between supporting a client's hope and reinforcing their denial. I didn't always hold that boundary as clearly as I should have. So this series, some will be on my podcast, and all of it will be on my Substack. Just find me at Substack, The Angry Therapist, and subscribe. Thank you for listening. Be well.